that everything is connected to everything else, and each arises according to causes. In fact, the Buddha said if you could understand this sentence, you would get enlightened. All things arise due to conditions. One thing is the condition for the next, codependently. So you can sense that. Then there is no separate me. There's just the stuff doing its dance.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 241 of Heart Wisdom, Jack Kornfield's podcast on the Be Here Now network. I am Ganesh, opening the door gracefully and gratefully to the paradox of self and no self. This is a real brain buster of an episode. It is very Ajahn focused, not in a intense using the brain to beat the brain kind of way, but it's a headier talk. Jack is generally, vibing on loving awareness, going into the various aspects of compassion and metta, where this one is very mind-focused. It's not in spite of the heart, but it's cool to hear Jack in a more maybe Joseph Goldstein-y area, and it really works. And for the Dharma stat keepers out there, this one was recorded first on April 23rd, 1990 at Spirit Rock Meditation Center, and is really a proper spelunking of the paradox we find ourselves in this world, that we have to develop our true self and find our place in this world, acting in this world, while, as Buddhists, as practitioners of spirituality, recognizing the truth of selflessness. And flipping it up a level, Jack's teacher Ajahn Chah brings up the fact that both self and selflessness are both concepts. They're still both approximations pointing at the mystery. So you could say in this episode, Jack helps us throw paint over the invisible man or invisible woman, and also helps us throw paint over the invisible man or woman. But before we dive any deeper down this rabbit hole and into the amazing wisdom nuggets that Jack shares in this episode, like the fact that the word for awareness in Japanese actually translates to happy sad, so cool. But before that, I have some announcements to share. Jack has some awesome events coming up. It is not too late to sign up for Jack's masterclass in interactive guided meditation. This was a beautifully shot course at Spirit Rock, where Jack goes into some of his most transformative and helpful and healing guided meditations that he has ever shared. The main modules of this course are always up on jackkornfield.com, but if you sign up by June 9th, you can take part in the 2 live question and answer sessions of this live cohort version of the masterclass in interactive guided meditation. And then on June 22nd, Jack will be back on land at Spirit Rock for the Awakened Heart, a day-long retreat of mindfulness and compassion practices for living wisely. If you can't make it in person at Spirit Rock, I think it may have sold out, but there is an online version so you can join from home. Both the masterclass in interactive guided meditation, along with all of Jack's other amazing courses, and the link to register for the Awakened Heart Day Long will all be at jackkornfield.com. If you would like all of this info, as well as fresh articles and meditations, Dharma talks, whatever we have coming down the proverbial cornfield pipeline, if you would like that delivered to your inbox, you can sign up for Jack's email teachings at jackkornfield.com/newsletter. Thank you for joining us once again in this paradoxical episode we find ourselves in. 241, the paradox of self and no self. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you help others through the authenticity of your being, and may your heart be smiling. Namaste.
Some of you have been sitting here for 2 weeks. Some of you for a bit less than a week. I'd like to speak tonight about the jewel of the Buddha's awakening, of his vision that freed him, that brought a sense of freedom and complete wholeness in his enlightenment. And that is the understanding of selflessness. Also like to speak about it in terms of respect that we might bring to ourselves in our practice. See if I can fit those two together for you. Begin with a story from Tales of a Magic Monastery, mythical tales of a monastery where monks go when they are fed up with their own monastery. I'm a monk myself, and the one question I really wanted to ask is, what is a monk? I could get no good answer at my home monastery, so I went off to the Magic Monastery, and after a long and arduous journey, I arrived and asked. For the answer, I was given a most peculiar question. Do you mean in the daytime or at night? Now, what could that mean? When I didn't answer further, he picked it up again. A monk, like everyone else, is a creature of expansion and contraction. During the day, he or she is contracted behind their cloister walls, dressed in a habit or robe like all the others, doing the routine things you expect a monk to do. But at night they expand. The walls cannot contain them. They move throughout the world and they touch the stars. Oh, I thought to myself, poetry. To bring him down to earth, I began to ask, well, during the day, in his real body. He said, wait, that's the difference between you and us. You people regularly assume that the contracted state is the real body. It is real in a sense, but here we tend to start from the other end, the expanded state. The daytime state we refer to as the body of fear, and whereas you tend to judge a monk by their decorum during the day, we tend to measure a monk by the number of persons they touch at night and the number of stars. We live in this strange world of expansion and contraction. You've been following your breath for a number of days. Your body opens and the breath moves in. Your body closes and the breath moves out. Your mind expands and contracts. Maybe you notice that. It can get very small sometimes, identified and caught and reactive, and then it gets spacious and open and big like the sky. The heart, too, opens, closes, expands, and contracts. Sometimes tiny, sometimes again contains greatness, wonderful things. To live is to live in this reality of expansion and contraction. And the practice that we do is to listen to sense with our attention, with care and respect, this whole process of expansion, contraction. Now, there's a certain paradox that's inherent in this life, central to it, to which the Buddha spoke. And this is the paradox of self and no self. I remember my teacher Ajahn Chah at one point said a really astonishing thing for a great Buddhist teacher. He said one night when we were gathered in the monastery talking about Dharma, he said, you know, all this teaching about no self, it's not true. My ears perked up now. This is very interesting. He said, of course, all the stuff about self, that's not true either. Isn't that interesting? Because in Buddhism you hear the teachings about no self over and over again. What could he have meant by that? Each of those sets of words, self, no self, are concepts or ideas or words that we use in a very crude approximation of pointing to some mystery of this process of life that's neither self nor no self. As Carol spoke of yesterday evening, the things come too closely together to be just sorrow or just joy. They're both together. Or just birth and death separately. They really both come together. In Japanese, one of the words for awareness is happy-sad. To be present, really present, is to connect with this mystery. Now, how does this manifest or show itself in the practice that we are doing? As we listen and pay attention, walking, sitting, noticing mindfully, we need to respect two different aspects of this process of being. One is the aspect of no self. And that comes as we listen and sense and feel our life as a changing, flowing, moving process. We open to it and sense that what was solid or I or mine, as we listen and feel directly without all the ideas that hold it together like glue, when the mind and its ideas start to go away a bit, that it becomes much more dynamic and changing. There are many ways this selflessness shows itself to you. Isn't that funny? The selflessness shows itself. One way is that whatever you sense cannot be possessed. You sense thoughts or feelings or sounds. You sense your own body, but can you really possess it? To possess it would mean you'd own it and it would do what you wanted. Doesn't work that way, does it? I mean, if you possessed your body, you could ask it to do many things. Don't get sick, stay well, do not age. Does it listen? You don't possess it. So one sense, very deeply, of anattā, of selflessness, is that experience, moment to moment, that we don't own or possess what arises. Another way it shows itself to us is that it comes and goes by itself. The breath breathes itself. The thoughts think themselves. The pictures picture themselves. The sounds sound themselves. Hearing hears itself. Feelings feel themselves. They come. Do you ask happiness or sadness, irritation, excitement, restlessness to come? Doesn't it do it by itself? If you sense back today, didn't it all pretty much do it by itself? I mean, the best maybe you could do was haul this bag of bones, as it's called, around to have those experiences. So it's not possessible. It comes and goes by itself. Fantastic. It arises out of nothing, out of the void, and it goes back into nothing. We talked about this last retreat. What happened to today? It arose, did its little dance, and now it's just about dark and it's gone. Back there with the 1980s and the 1970s and 60s and the 18th century and the Romans and the Greeks and the pharaohs and so forth. It's disappeared, gone, just like your childhood. So you can sense in some way that it arises for a little time in a certain form, and then that form ends and a new form replaces it, one moment after another. As one pays attention in a different way in practice, not just sensing it coming and going of itself or arising out of this silent, empty void for a moment, or being unpossessable. Another way it's seen through our careful attention is a kind of dissolution of the sense of self. You sit and walk and pay very deep attention to the breath, sensations, and thoughts. And the more carefully you pay attention, like an electron microscope, everything you look at, one breath becomes 10 sensations, beginning, middle, and end, and then 100 little sensations. One pain or sensation in the body, you feel into it deeply, and it has all these sparkles, and the whole body dissolves into just tingles and sparkles. And then thoughts come and you sense them immediately, and they're just fragments of sounds and words. And the more deeply you look, the more it becomes like a music rather than something solid. Now, initially, this is not very easy. First, because it's taken to be solid for so long, it's hard to see that deeply. And then when you do, there usually arises fear. Oh, wow, it's all falling apart. In fact, there isn't anything to stand on. It's like quicksand. At this point, at this level of vision, what's necessary in practice is simply to note, quicksand, falling apart, falling apart. It's a process of letting go into that kind of emptiness. And the more silent you get, the more things come apart, the more likely it is that very deep fear will arise in you. Very deep sense of loss will come also. The whole game at that point is just to say, fear, that too arises. There's loss. And to see that is made of the same nothing that everything else is. It's a process of seeing and letting go all the different attempts to make something solid until it really opens of its own. Now, there's another way you may see this selflessness. That's the sense of interdependence that we've spoken of, or codependence. That as you listen quietly, without a lot of thoughts and preconceptions, you will begin to notice that everything is related to everything else. It all arises codependently with what else is around us. There's the bell, and the hitting of the bell, and the sound. What is it that rings? Your ear? Your mind? The bell? The stone? The between? Is there even such a thing as the between? Isn't it all of that together? Your mind, the ear, the between, the bell, the stone, this activity. And this is done because I went and prepared a talk and thought about that, and that's because I flew down here on a particular airline because the Wright brothers developed airplanes, right? And Ding Li Mei went to China to come back and build this center, or Tibet. And that's because Buddhism went to Tibet in the 9th century, that he got turned on to it. And that's because of the Buddha's awakening, but that was because of his parents and all of the previous generations of cavemen and cave women and so forth, long before him. That everything is connected to everything else, and each arises according to causes. In fact, the Buddha said, if you could understand this sentence, you would get enlightened. All things arise due to conditions. One thing is the condition for the next, codependently. So you can sense that. Then there is no separate me. There's just the stuff doing its dance. Another way you might sense this emptiness is that it is all an appearance, a dream, a phantom, an echo. Let me read you something. Be cheerful, sir, or madam. Our revels now are ended. These, our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And, like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit, shall dissolve and, like this insubstantial pageant, faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. That's from the Great Sutra of William Shakespeare. Isn't that wonderful? That's a sense, he knew it, and you too have moments that you sense that. Insubstantial, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on. You can sense that with life. It becomes space and form, and as you open, you can learn to swim in it in some way. What we took as a solid self, these 5 processes, my thoughts, my body, my feelings, in the midst of this becomes instead living in a stream. So that is some of the understandings that you may look for in your practice of selflessness. To sense that requires attention and care, a listening in a deep, silent way, and a great deal of respect. What is this? What also needs respect is our self, is the development of our self, of our true self. Often in the sutras of the Buddha, he speaks about enlightenment as the development of 7 factors or 7 qualities. The development of mindfulness and investigation and energy and calm and concentration and joy or rapture and equanimity. And you attain enlightenment through the development in yourself of these qualities. Or the perfections of a Buddha over lifetimes, the perfections of patience and compassion and courage and integrity. Over and over again, discovering these capacities of strength and well-being and calm and ease in ourselves, developing, nourishing, bringing them to fruition. In fact, the factors of enlightenment, the development of these, are the most frequent description of enlightenment in the sutras, along with that other interesting description, the one who clings to nothing. So these 2 descriptions really are descriptions of self and no self. The no self, one who clings to nothing, attaches, holds to nothing. And then this other side, he or she who develops calm, equanimity, patience, boundless compassion, strength, integrity. And as you practice, you discover that this sense of self can grow in you, that you can nourish or uncover or evoke. May strength arise. May awareness arise. May compassion arise. May I feel loving kindness. And with practice, these qualities grow stronger. So you develop yourself as you lose yourself. Now, how do these 2 fit together? Let's look at it a bit more. It's kind of mysterious. The development and the empty process that does itself. The friend, Vipassana teacher at Harvard, friend of ours, and psychologist named Jack Engler, who written quite a bit about this, said at one point in a kind of summary of his work, you must be somebody before you can be nobody. And so his research led him to see that you have to have a sense of self before you can lose it. But that's kind of a shorthand and a bit too linear to describe the actual process in meditation. It doesn't work quite that simply. In fact, both opening to no self and the development of self, or the discovery of true self, are two parallel developments in our spiritual life, both being emptier and fuller, as a kind of spiral that happens over and over again. It's not just that you get to be a strong personality and you're strong enough then to die on your cushion and have a spiritual awakening of selflessness, and then you're a strong, empty person or something like that. Doesn't work that way. In fact, sometimes it happens backwards. I know some people who practiced who had profound experiences of selflessness, really deep and genuine ones, and then didn't know what to do with it. And it took them years to kind of figure out how from that place to go back in the world and live, even though those experiences were genuine. I even met people when I worked in psychiatric wards who I sensed had very deep, genuine experiences of selflessness, but just didn't know what to do with it. Now, my own practice, if I may share a bit of that with you, has been interesting in this regard. When I first began to practice, I wanted to become wise, to understand. There was some ego in that, I'll say. Quite a bit, as a matter of fact. Become a wise person. And I wanted to get enlightened to see what that was about, if nothing else, so I could tell other people, you know. And I did it through my mind combined with strong willpower. And I would sit for hours and not move and walk and do very intensive practice and concentrate, focus my mind until I could dissolve this whole body. You know, any place I looked, my concentration was strong enough, it would just break apart into like atoms, kalapas it's called in Sanskrit. Nothing was solid, and there was this great sense of emptiness and deep insights into that which arose. But they weren't very well integrated, I discovered. And when I came back from doing long periods of practice like that, and kind of came down from that level of being particles back into my old body and personality, it was more or less as I had left it. Which was a problem. I had tried to do it just with my mind, and I spent 10 years doing that with fair success and a lot of interest. I was also supported in that because Buddhism in Asia and the cultures where I lived are not ones that, in those Buddhism, particularly in South and Southeast Asia, in which practice, meditation is taught so much in an integrated way. It's much more you go to a monastery, you renounce the world, you leave it behind, and feelings and body are quite unimportant. Just what you see is what matters. So the first level was just vision. Well, I had vision far out. But then what? I discovered on returning that being in an intimate relationship or trying to work in the world, trying to relate to other human beings, that I was very much out of touch with my feelings. And so after 10 years of working to see clearly, I spent another 10 years learning how to feel. Few years initially in therapy, some thousands of dollars, just learning how to cry. Now, some of you do that for free here. I admire it. And the whole sense of my values in practice changed quite dramatically. From wanting to see and know, instead something shifted where if I were asked what I practiced for, what I most deeply wanted, it was to be able to love well. It didn't matter how much I saw, or maybe it was based that I had seen a lot, and that was wonderful, but it wasn't enough. What I really wanted was to learn how to love quite fully in this life. So 10 years working with my mind, 10 years working with my heart and learning to feel some, getting better at that. Then what's come is I realized that I don't live in my body so well. I'm kind of moving down, as you can sense. And this next 10 years I've started on this is really to learn to live in my body and to be it. First is to see it, and then is to feel And finally, not just to love well, but to be that which I know, to embody that love or that wisdom, to have them actually be what is here. If you just do it in the mind, my own experience is that it's not really integrated. You can have realizations, and they're powerful, but they tend to become idealistic. Or if you live in them, it's as if your mind is split off from the rest of your life and the world. It becomes dualistic. And the world is too painful or too fearful. It's samsaric, it's dukkha, it's terrible if you do it just in the mind. And there becomes this split between the mind and the body, the mind and the heart. And that very split is what has caused so much suffering in our world today, this week for Earth Day. It's because people can sit at a computer, and it's quite interesting to play war games and imagine warhead to kill ratios and appropriate targeting, and how many bogeys you can shoot down, and how you get the MIRV missiles on the other side to disintegrate with your weapons and so forth. It's like a video game parlor. And if you don't realize it's babies and old people and women and men and trees and chipmunks and all these things that are alive, it's actually interesting because it's from here up. I knew some bomber pilots during the Vietnam War who did their practice that way. They go up in a B-52. It was all very mechanical. You understand that separation? There was a samurai who came into a Zen master at one point, and he said, kind of boasting, he said, "The whole world is empty. It's all emptiness." You know how the Zen masters always answer. Zen master said, "Ha! Well, you know of this. You're a kind of dirty old samurai," and threw something at him. And the samurai, of course, drew his sword, was really insulted. An insult in Japan is the cost of your life. And the Zen master just looked over and he said, "Emptiness is quick to show its temper, isn't it?" So my own practice has actually been a movement from the mind, from seeing, from awakening, to feeling, and trying to learn practice as a way of connecting with all of the heart and the emotional life. And finally, to inhabit and become that. Because I could observe my body, I do walking meditation, breath, I could put my attention anywhere very well. In this knee, there's this pain and this pressure and all these elements happening. But it's as if I used it or observed it rather than inhabited it, if that makes some sense to you. So for me, practice has been a process of gradual reclamation